Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders Without podcast. Today, once again, I have an incredible, phenomenal guest for you guys. My new good friend, Corey Poirier from Canada on the East Coast. I don't know what can I say other than he's an angel. We just spent the past hour. He's been basically coaching me, giving me a ton of value. I'm so glad I recorded it because he dropped some absolute bomb on how to really, take a podcast to the next level, how to get top-notch, incredible A-list names on his podcast. And he's been blessed to have incredible people on his own podcast called um, Let's Do Influence. He's been podcasting for the past at least 10 years. Top 3 in marketing, top 5 in business, highly rated podcast, one of the best podcasts in the world. And some of the names that he's been able to get on his podcast, the likes of Jack Canfield, Lisa Nichols, Les Brown, yes, the real Les Brown, Marianne Williamson, T.R. Hecker, and on and on. So absolutely highly recommend you guys check his podcast called Let's Do Influencing. He's doing a lot of other things as a paid professional speaker for 21 years, TedX Speaker, and all that. So he's doing incredible things. We're going to unpack all of that. But first and foremost, we're going to talk about him as a human being. So, Corey, brother, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. I'm super stoked to be here and looking forward to making some magic happen.
Happy to hear that. Let's get going. So as I said, first of all, let's get to know you as a person. First of all, tell us, for people that don't know you, over and beyond the very little introduction I give you, who's Corey as a person?
For me, I think that starts with being raised by a single mother. That's usually where I start that because I feel like it's sort of, I guess, influenced and informed exactly who I am. You know, it's a big, really big part of who I am. So I was raised by a single mother in a small, tiny little town. When I graduated, so to put in perspective where I started, when I graduated, I didn't know the difference between fiction and nonfiction, which is kind of ironic. Years later, writing books. Didn't read a book till age 27. In fact, when I told my mom I wanted to write a book, she said, I think you need to read one first. So then I read one. How to Win Friends and Influence People was that book. And I barely graduated high school. And when I say that, it's not one of those I struggled in high school. Like literally, one of the teachers gave me a 49 plus 1 in a class where I needed a 50. So I don't even know if I ethically graduated or if he gave me I can't see that I landed at 49 plus 1. I think I probably was at 46. And he actually boasted it up to 49 and then gave me the plus 1 to always remind me that I didn't really earn it. So I say all that to say that I certainly didn't have likely to succeed, let alone most likely to succeed in my yearbook. And that's really, I think that's in a lot of ways informed everything about who I am. It actually is a big part of who I became, and I wouldn't change any of that. Whereas, why it's probably significant is whereas when I was at that age, I would have loved to have changed it. You know, I would have loved to have said, oh, okay, well, I'd love to start out where my mother could just go buy me a $40,000 car when I started high school and all that kind of stuff. But my first car was a Chevette, if anybody remembers what those are, Chevy Chevette, and it had black door, gray door and a black door. It had the whatever they call it on the bottom where you put I forget what it's called, but it's like a guard, like chip guard or something. But usually you paint over that. We didn't paint over it. It had no brakes. I got 2 accidents when I was 16 because the brakes couldn't be fixed. I think I bought it for $400, and I even had to get my grandfather to co-sign. So my point is, Lorenzo, is that it wasn't like this starting that gave me this big boost or advantage.
Wow, love that. It's absolutely brilliant, beautiful story. Now, looking back at the time that you said that teacher gave you just one to graduate. Now, looking back at that, how do you feel about that? Do you think that was a big push, a big motivation, not just to prove them wrong, but to say, hey, now I have to make it happen. I have to do something now. And have you considered going back to that person and say, not to be mean or whatnot, but just say, thank you. You were the reason why I am now where I am because you gave me that kick in the butt to get my life together, kind of things.
So there's a couple of answers to that. So on the first side, have I thought about it? Yes. To the point where I tried to find the person online, to see if they were still at that school. I mean, I figured age-wise, they probably would have retired.
Sure.
But I thought maybe I could find them on social media. We're doing a Google, and I've yet to find them. And I hate to say this, but I suspect that they may not even still be with us. Like
Okay.
he may have passed on. I mean, I know his name, I know his full name, and I'm in the state. By the way, I moved back to the same small town that I graduated from. So
Wow.
like I'm in the town, but his last name was unique, and I don't know one other person with that same last name. So I don't even know how I would find his family. I mean, I'm sure there's a way if I really pushed it, but so the answer is I was curious if he was still around. And I don't know if it was because I wanted to go back and thank him or what have you. It's just I was curious, but I could not find him anywhere. So I never really pursued that. What's also interesting, though, is my vice principal, totally different guy, who I did try to also find, told me one day specifically, probably told me more than once, but one day specifically, we used to have free classes, they called it, where you could go to a class or you could have a free period, and I would always take the free period. And sometimes I would arrive late for the previous class, so I didn't go to it, so I'd have like 2 free periods. And he caught me a couple times in those days, and he said, you're never going to amount to anything. And same thing, right? Like, I wonder how big a part that played. So him saying that as the vice principal of the school, how big a part did that play? So, I have one teacher that gave me the 49 plus 1. Another teacher told me I wouldn't amount to anything. And I think it served me, to your point, not as a like I'll show them, but more just to a point of I'll show myself. I'll prove to myself that they were wrong.
Yeah.
And kind of interesting, a little over a year ago, I had the opportunity to speak at Harvard University. And previous to that, I had spoken at multiple universities where I had professors in the room. And every one of those times, I always thought about those teachers that said I would never amount to anything. And meanwhile, now, I'm speaking to a group of teachers, let's say.
Did you share those 2 episodes with while you were speaking at Harvard?
No. So you mean like as far as when I was on the stage that I mentioned?
Yeah, just telling them, hey, this is where I came from, and just as part of who you are, and again, not as a way to be vindicative, but as a way to use that as a personal motivation. Be thankful for these people, because these people did a tremendous favor for you, because at the time it might have looked, hey, these guys are mean or whatever, but no, they did it for you to awaken the beast inside of you. You know what I mean? And that's
and so I guess the short answer is Harvard was a different setup. That one wasn't teachers in the room. So I had a very specific talk. It was actually about what my mother, a single mother, taught me about customer service.
Wow.
And so it was relating to 5 lessons around customer service I learned being raised by a single mother. But the other ones, like colleges and universities I've spoken at, I have mentioned that story sometimes and not others, but it was professors and teachers in the room, and I have mentioned the story, but I didn't do it every time. And, one of the other things that happened, which was kind of cool, is I ended up teaching at a community college, a business studies course for 5 years. So technically, I actually became a college teacher.
Wow.
And so while I was doing that, I thought about them saying, you'll never amount to anything as well. Now, just to add into that too, I did end up going to college, business college, and I did really well. But what happened in school is I just wasn't passionate. So I was like the class that I basically failed, I couldn't care less about it. But when I went into next, I moved on to actual business colleges, and I was getting like, we where we grew up, it was all percentages. It was like 90%, 80%, what have you.
Sure.
Well, 100% was obviously the highest you could get. In business, I hovered around 90 to 95%. So this is the same guy that barely could graduate high school. But once I found something I was passionate about, I crushed it. I did great. And so it's important to mention, and I was just going to add, it's not to say that whenever I said like speaking at a college university later, it's not to say that I went to high school, barely graduated, and then stopped there. And then it was the guy that barely graduated only and then went to speak at colleges. Like I did go to college. I did go to university or college, 2 colleges. Not that that matters, because I think I still would have had the same outcome either way. But I don't want to make it look like I didn't, in case somebody says, well, didn't you go to college? Because I did. And I did well in college. But in the high school system is where I struggled.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be amazing if somehow you were able to track down that vice principal and invite him on your podcast,
Absolutely, I would. 100%. Well, and I'm just trying to think. So I graduated, I'm trying to think how many years ago. I feel like it's like 27 or 28. I have to do the math. So honestly, he would have to be 90 right now.
Oh, wow.
At least, because he was the vice principal. He had already worked his way up through the ranks, and I feel like he already had white hair. I think he was like 60 something then. So he was probably close to retirement then. That was 1993. Wow. So again, he probably both those teachers would be at least 90 now.
Yeah. Wow.
And again, people live to 100, so it's not saying they're not,
Sure.
still around. But I haven't heard their name mentioned once in the last 15 years. So I don't
Wow,
even know how
amazing.
it would be. Like, yeah, it would be great to bring him on the podcast. If I could reach him, I could find him, and he was up for that, I'd be all in.
Do you still keep in touch with some of your classmates from high school from back then?
So let me think here. Yes and no. So yes, not all of my main friends, but for instance, we have a friend who is living in a different part of the country right now. He's in Western Canada, but he's home. I just saw a post that he was home for like a week or whatever, and he's coming over tomorrow night for supper at our place.
Nice.
And then we have another friend that I went to school with. She's home with her son, and I got to message her today to give her the timeline, but I think she's coming over either Saturday or Sunday. And so those are two people I graduated with. And one of them, Tyler, I graduated with him. Then we went to that business college I mentioned together, and then we actually started a business together. And then he moved across the country, and I kept running the business. But yeah, so we stayed in touch. I have a few other friends that were part of that same group that live in Western Canada that when I go out there, I visit with them. So I would say probably 10 at least people that I graduated with that I still I can still send a text message to right now.
Awesome. Did you attend any of those reunions that the schools organize usually every 5, 10, 20 years, whatever? Or you don't care about those?
No, I did. I don't remember which one it was, if it was 10 or 15. I think it might have been 15, but I did attend it. Funny enough, I attended it with two of those people of the 10 that I just mentioned I'm still in contact with. And I went to it, and it was just like a, hey, what have you been up to? Which is what you would expect it to be. I think at the time I was a speaker by then. Like, I was out speaking on the road, and I was working full time as a speaker. And I think some of the, kids were like, oh my God, that sounds like an awesome job. Like, I think it was, there was like some, wow, that's pretty cool what you've done.
You must have surprised quite a few people, eh?
Yeah, well, especially where, like I said, I wasn't the guy that was expected to amount to a whole bunch. But I will say though, even though it was like, hey, that's cool what you do, I'm not really, whenever I'm doing this type of thing, I'm doing an interview or what have you, then it's typically that I'm talking about some of the achievements. But whenever I hang with my buddy Tyler tonight or tomorrow night when he's over visiting us, he'll have to ask me about stuff. Like, I won't just say, oh, you wouldn't believe what I did the other day. I interviewed so-and-so. Like, I don't usually talk about it. So same thing when I went to the high school reunion, I didn't say, hey, here's what I do. I had people saying, hey, I saw on Facebook that you do speaking and stuff. Tell me about that. But I never was the one to say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. And to your point, it's probably just because it doesn't matter to me. I don't need to impress anybody. And I would rather just have a real conversation. But having said that, I'm proud of what I've done, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. And, I get excited. Like, there's moments of what I've done, like you mentioned names earlier, but Bob Proctor, for instance, one of my moments, if you will, that is a milestone for me was when and this wasn't planned in the interview, but I was interviewing him, and I brought up his copy of Think and Grow Rich. Those that follow Bob Proctor know that his copy of Think and Grow Rich is copy he carries with him is like almost 60 years old. And so I was asking him about it, and he yelled out for somebody that was in the control room doing the recording, and said, hey, can you bring out my copy of Think and Grow Rich? And, I have a picture and video of me holding that copy of the book in my hand. And the energy in that book's like 50, at the time, I think it was 57 years old. Like, that's a milestone to me, to know that I'm holding something that, I don't know, probably 20 people have held in their hand, but also that it has 57 now, probably 60 years of Bob reading through that every day. Wow. And, to hold that in my hand, that's the kind of thing to me that's a major milestone. And, I'm proud of that. And so, of course, if somebody asks me, what are the moments that stand out, that's going to be a moment I'll talk about.
Absolutely. Wow. That's amazing. Now, let's go back to me asking you a couple of questions about getting to know you as a person. Now, tell us, Corey, what makes you happy as a person?
Happy as a person? Wow. I mean, there's a lot of answers to that. So, first and foremost is probably my family. Mm-hmm. Like, my girlfriend and I have 2 young sons. And so, of course, that is certainly one thing that makes me really happy. But I also, the career I have, like being able to do what I love every day, obviously makes me really happy. I mean, I've said to people, if you ever catch me like being really miserable in general to somebody or in general, you let me know and I'll stop. But at the same time, I've even put it out there and said, if you do catch me doing that, I'll give you, and I've said it different times, like $500 if you catch me doing that.
Wow.
And nobody's cashed in yet. But the reason for that is because I love what I do. Do I have times where, I'm being more pessimistic than I'd like to be? Yes. Am I human? Yes.
Of course.
But 99% of the time, I mean, I told you this off air, but I have a cold right now. Yes. And I'm still trying to bring my full energy to this. And so,
Absolutely.
and how I can do that is because I'm passionate about what I do. So my answer is, typically I'm a pretty happy guy and I love what I do. So what makes me happy is doing what I love. And I have a lot of those loves. Like, I haven't been at it enough recently, but I love yoga, and I haven't been doing yoga as much as I should. I play guitar and write music, and I should be writing a song again soon. I'm working on my latest book, and I started it when we went on vacation this summer, and it got it half done in that week, and then I haven't touched it since, and I want to get it done again. So I love writing. So, I mean, there's so many things I could give for that answer, but the short answer is family and career.
Love that. We're going to talk about your books and all that in a moment, but now let me ask you, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Angry is a tough word for me because I don't like to think I get super angry often, but I have like rant moments. And I don't, and same thing with sad, like it's really, for me, the sad part is just more about when I see something happening to somebody that I wish wasn't happening to them. Whatever that is, that could be somebody that, like, one of my great uncles passed away a little, like, I think 4 months ago. And it happened, and thank you so much. And it happened like over a course of like 8 months, or something like that. So you got to see it happening, and I was over visiting him and saw it happen. I was over a couple times visiting him, and we know his wife quite well, and watched her lose, the person she's been with for 40 some, 50 some years. And so that kind of stuff makes me sad. Just the fact that, as humans, we have to go through that. It makes me sad to know that there's a disparity where some people, like just being born in Canada, I already got a bigger advantage than whatever percentage of the world. Like even just there's a guy named the Gratitude Guy, and I heard him do a talk one time, and he said how him and his son calculated that his son, who was complaining about his job, was working at McDonald's during high school. They figured out by working at McDonald's, he was in the top 50% of earners in all of the world.
Totally, yes.
Because if you take, you start calculating countries where they can't afford food and water, when you're working at McDonald's, you're in their mind, you'd be like, oh my God, that person has it made. Plus they're living at home with their parents. They don't have any expenses. And so those kind of things make me sad. Just the fact that there's not that equal balance, that we don't all have, like, what I take for granted, somebody else would give anything for.
Totally.
So I think those things make me sad. They don't make me angry. And then when I have like rant moments, I'll give you an example of something that I might rant about. Now, I don't really carry this to other people, like, meaning I don't make it like a big point to, I'm going to go on Facebook and rant about this all the time, but I'll tell anybody who will listen about it. Like, I did a talk about it that I didn't like the quality of it, so we haven't put, like, the quality of the video of it, so we haven't put it out, but I'm actually working on some virtual talks for some of the speakers that are going to be speaking at our live event soon, and I'm going to do a test one, and I'm going to do it on that same talk, and I'll put it out there and I'll promote it and stuff. So in other words, I'm willing to talk about it publicly. But one of the things that bothers me is watching people mislead other people with their marketing about what they can do and who they are. So for instance, what I mean by that is seeing somebody that's been in, I'm going to use a random example, a really extreme example, but somebody that I know has been in podcasting for 2 weeks that just launched a podcasting course about how to run a podcast. And they haven't even barely got their teeth wet. They have 2 episodes out and they're now teaching it. That kind of stuff bothers me. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that'll position themselves in a way that they're really not, and then make the justification, well, you got to fake it till you make it. But I think there's a level with that. So it's okay, I think, Lorenzo, if you're a chapter ahead of me in the metaphorical world and you're teaching me what you've learned in that chapter, that's fine. So in other words, you don't have to be ahead of everybody to teach. But I think that if you're, for example, if you're in social media and you don't have any engagement on your posts, you shouldn't be advertising yourself as a social media guru. That's what I mean. But now, if you figured out one cool aspect of social media that most people haven't, let's say Facebook ads, and you crushed it with Facebook ads, and you're maybe ahead of me enough that I can learn from you, as long as you stay ahead of me, then I think go all in. So as long as you know more than the people you're teaching, I think it's fine. But when you market yourself to say, I'm going to teach you something I haven't done, that's a rant moment for me. And I give you an example. I call it, they're living a filtered life. We don't see the unfiltered. So my talk was called Living the Unfiltered Life. And so that's the kind of thing where I just shake my head, but at the same time, I feel bad because I wish I could show more people how to research who you're actually dealing with, and like buying from and working with, because, I see a lot of people, again, that I'll give you an example as well. We'll say, for example, they'll say, I'm trying to think of a good example, but they'll say that I've done this thing. And meanwhile, they've told me privately that they're struggling in that area. So for instance, is people that will come to me asking, how can I get paid to speak? And then I'll see them 6 months later teaching a speaking program. And one of their focuses is on how do you get paid to speak? And then 4 months after that, they'll reach out to me and say, hey, Corey, can you remind me what the strategy is you have for getting paid bookings? But you're
Really?
charging.
Wow.
Teach them. Oh, I see that stuff regularly. And so that stuff, it's a struggle for me to keep my mouth quiet and say, you know what, I get it. I get you're trying to market.
I see that happen all the time because, I used to be very involved in e-commerce. I lived in China and Hong Kong. I went countless factories and all that. So I know all the key players in the e-commerce. And what I hated seeing and really, just like you said, making me really upset is you would see from time to time these guys, coming out of nowhere. Just they made $1,000 on Amazon, and now they're selling a course on how to make $1 million on Amazon. I've learned from a so-called 7-figure while they haven't even sold maybe $1,000 themselves. And you see that all over the place all the time. And even same thing with coaching. I mean, the people actually making money, they're not selling courses. They're actually busy doing it. You know what I mean? Because if I were to find something that's going to allow me to crush it, for example, on Facebook ads, I'm not going to go out and teach it to the world. I'm going to keep it for myself. You know what I mean? For my business. And a lot of people, what they do, once that is obsolete and not working, that's when they start selling it. You know what I mean? And that's unethical,
Yeah, I think here's what it comes down to me. And again, this is just my personal opinion. So this part's not even a judgment on other people. It's every teach their own. But I think for me, usually, so how it works usually for me, and I feel comfortable and I can sleep at night with this, is usually whenever I take something on that I'm teaching, it's reluctantly. It's like I'm so busy. I don't even know if I should take this on. Yeah. But I get asked so much. So I'll give you an example is when we launched our speaking program to help people get paid to speak and help people get bookings, it was because people were coming at me 5 times a day asking. And so I'm like, it would be more efficient for me to create a program to teach them this than it would be for me to keep saying the same answer over and over again. But here's the thing. I was 15 years in to a paid speaking career before I launched that program. So I was like living this every day. And, until COVID, and this was intentional, I started pivoting away during COVID, pre-COVID actually. So it wasn't even because of COVID, but until 2 years ago, I was still actively on the road speaking, getting paid to speak every week. And so what I'm getting is I was living it, helping people come to me and say, I want to land a branded talk like a TedX talk. Well, I've landed 3 of them. I'm not going to teach you that if I haven't landed one. And so everything that I eventually teach has to be something I feel that I've achieved some degree of success in, that somebody else, to the point where somebody else is saying, teach me this. So you and I were talking off air about podcasting, and you mentioned that at the start. So I can say that, that's a thing that I've fought for a long time. But I have people every day saying to me, if I launch a podcast, what should I do? Or how can I do this? I've fought that. But I feel, Lorenzo, when I'm ready, and I don't know when that'll be, that I can teach a podcasting course because I've lived that life for 12 years, 11 years. And as you know, I could teach it on interview skills or how do you land the big name interviews or any of those areas. And I've done each aspect of it. And I'm still fighting it 12 years later, launching a podcasting course. But I see people 12 weeks in, like I said, or 12 days in launching a course. Yeah. And I just think that you should be seasoned by the time you start teaching something. That's just my personal opinion. So that's my rant area. Since you asked me, what's my rant?
No, totally agree with you. I'm totally on the same page as you. Now, tell us, what scares you?
So I'm on 2 trains of thought. This is an easy one because because I think it's most people's answer. A lot of people don't know this, but the number one fear in the world above death is public speaking. Well, I've already done the one that's worse than death. So I've already tackled that one. And I would argue stand-up comedy is even worse than public speaking, but they don't put it in there because so few people try it. And I've done both. I've jumped out of a plane, which I could have died when I did, and I'm scared of heights. So that was a really big deal. I've surfed even though I can't swim. And so I've done a lot of the things that would have scared me.
How did you jump from a plane? Was it like skydiving, or tell us about that?
Yeah, skydiving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, skydiving. And it was, in fairness, it was tandem. I jumped with somebody else that knew what they were doing. The surfing I did on my own, on the board on my own, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was in Tofino, British Columbia, which are pretty rough waves, especially when you can't swim. But I tackled those things. So when you say, what scares me, I would say this is where it gets to be a tricky answer. On one hand, I accept the fact that we all have to go at some point. But I think what scares me is dying too young. And when I say too young, I mean, it's before I get to experience, at this point, a lot of what's going to happen with my children as they grow up. Because, I got a 1 and a 4-year-old. And I think it's just like not being able to see that. Which again, part of that's dying, like the immortality or the mortality part. But I think a bigger part of it is all the things I feel I would miss. Whereas maybe if I didn't have children and if I wasn't in a relationship, maybe I wouldn't think that way. I'd just be like, I'm living for the day and we'll see what happens. But now I think in terms of legacy and future and stuff like that. So it scares me, but I also accept that it's going to happen to all of us. What they say, nobody gets out alive. So,
are you religious?
I have to live every day full.
Are you religious or spiritual in any shape or form?
More spiritual. And I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I went to church, not regularly, but we went to church as a family sometimes. And I went to catechism. I don't even know if that term, if everybody knows what that is, but it's like, I don't even know what you call it, but it's like almost like, I think, Bible camp, almost like it's classroom that you go to once a week. And I went to there right up until like grade 8 or 9. So, it's not a thing that like I wasn't exposed to religion, but I feel like it's just that for me, I just never really fully dialed in. And more in recent years, I have kind of fully dialed or dived into spirituality. And there's numerous reasons. Like I've been working on a documentary that's related to spirituality, so that pulled me in more. I've been reading more books that are more spiritual based. And so I would say a bit of both, but certainly leaning more towards spirituality. Absolutely.
Same here. Totally. And, I've had the spiritual awakening since the start of this pandemic, and I've devoured all kinds of books on that. And now, and all it has allowed me to look at things from a different perspective. Like before, when something bad happened to me, I would say, why me? What I did to deserve this? Now I look at it, at the reason, and asking the question, why is this trying to teach me? What is the lesson for me to learn here? And when I look at this from this perspective, it allows me to not only to overcome things, but also it makes me understand something much more deeper, which is, this life, it basically, and I can talk for hours about that, but just to summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences, is that I'm not afraid of dying. Dying is just, it's not game over. The curtain doesn't fall. You just transition to a different phase of your soul journey. Just like at night where you retire with sleep, in the morning you wake up, you have a brand new day ahead of you. Same thing when one lifetime is over, you wake up in a new body, new lifetime, and so on and so forth. All of us have had multiple past lives and will have multiple future lives. So when you understand that, it makes you, I wouldn't say it makes you invincible, but it makes you look at things differently, that, hey, it doesn't matter. It also makes you really understand what really truly matters. It's not the money and all that, the materials. It's the relationships, the people, the time you have, and your health. Once you understand that, then you become a different person. And it has allowed me personally to, instead of focusing on money and material, to focus instead on impact. So whenever I look at a business, whatever, the first question I ask is not the revenue. It's what is the impact this is having, or what is the impact this will have as a result of me being involved? Because impact is infinitely more fulfilling. And when you focus on impact, you don't have to worry about money. The money is going to take care of itself. It's going to be a natural byproduct of it, at least from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great quote. I think it's by Gandhi. At least that's the context I heard it in. But there's a great quote. People always say to me, like, I hear both sides. I hear people say, just live for today, live in the moment. Don't worry about, how much money you spend. Don't worry about saving or anything, because you only have today. And then I hear other people say, that I know other people that live like, I'm saving every penny because I'm worried about my retirement. I'm worried about this and that. There's a great quote by Gandhi that I think covers it off perfectly. How I view it is, live like you could die tomorrow, but plan like you could live forever.
Oh, love that. Love that. Absolutely.
I think it covers both because I try to live every day to the fullest, which is to live for today and live like you could die soon and life is only short, but also have, some idea of future planning. Don't always just live like every day like, you know what, tomorrow doesn't matter. And I mean, it probably doesn't matter in this moment, but it still matters in the bigger scheme of things. Like even how you're treating people, you should care about what the impact of that is tomorrow as well. So I love that quote because it reminds me of both. Like, be thoughtful of tomorrow, but live for today.
I love it as well. Yeah, absolutely. Now tell us, what would you say is your personal superpower?
Wow. Yeah, I'd love to say it's getting people to trust me enough to share things they haven't shared with others.
Mm.
And then I would also love to say that it's that I'm very, 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 very passionate. And I feel like that can be a superpower. And I'm passionate about life as much as I am about certain things now. Whereas when I first started this journey of passion, I was passionate about one specific thing I was doing. Now I'm just passionate. And to put a perspective on that for me, because a lot of people confuse the two, I think passion is what you do, purpose is why you're doing it.
Mm.
So what that means to me is if I'm performing stand-up comedy, I love doing that. That's the passion. If I'm taking pictures, photography, that's the passion. If I'm a speaker, speaking is the passion. But why you're doing it could be to take people out of the crappy part of their life, to create a positive ripple for somebody else, to capture moments, a glimpse of time if you're a photographer, or create a legacy with your photography. So to me, they're two different things. But I think both of them go hand in hand.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
but I always had the purpose rather, because a lot of people these days say, I'm sick of people saying find your passion, and you shouldn't be telling people not to be happy unless they find their passion and all that. So what I'm suggesting is you have to find out what you're here to do. And for some people, they might not ever find a quote unquote passion, but they still might have a purpose. So like they might not find you might volunteer, for example, and you might not be passionate about it. Like you might not be, oh my God, I can't wait to get up and volunteer today. But what you see, the smiles on the faces or the lives you impact, that might drive you as your purpose. So I don't necessarily think you have to have both. I think purpose usually stays the same for a long time. Passion can change every day. Like passion to me today could be stand-up comedy, tomorrow could be speaking. So just to put a perspective on those, to me, they can be separate. But I think perhaps for me, at least, one of my superpowers is that I do truly live. Brendan Burchard did this great thing. He asked himself, once he got in this big car accident, did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? Wow. And then he started changing his life to make sure he lived, loved, and mattered. And I'd like to think that that's how I'm living my life, in a way that I am living fully and loving fully, and that I will, and matter to me doesn't have to be like people talking about me after I'm gone, but maybe an impact I had still lives after my body's gone.
Love that. Love that. Now let's move forward. You like traveling, right?
Yes. Well, I miss it. So I like it and miss it.
Yeah. Let me now take you down a different type of traveling down the memory line. Let's go back to when you're a young boy. When we're growing up, everybody asks us, parents, family, teachers, everybody. So Corey, what do you want to become when you grow up? What was your answer back then?
Rock star.
Oh, wow.
And I can answer that quickly because I was obsessed with music. To the point where I knew the birth dates and heights of some of the rock stars that we followed.
Which was your favorite bands back then?
Admittedly, Poison.
Okay.
For those, I don't know if everybody listening will know who they are, but they were what we call a glam band. They wore makeup. The first time I saw their album, I said, "Oh, who are those girls?" And my buddy said, "Those aren't girls." And so it's weird that I would say, "Oh, now I'm going to plop this in and check it out just for that reason." But I listened to their music and I was sold. And I really liked that '80s music scene, like LA, Hollywood Strip. And so the bands like that, they were the band that I sort of followed. But as far as bands with an S, I was into Metallica, Motley Crue, Megadeth, Skid Row, and Poison was one of those bands as well.
Love that. So, and when you were a young boy in school, what was your favorite subject?
Wow. Favorite subject in school? I mean, it was definitely a business. like it was business related. So I mentioned earlier, business was the thing I kind of thrived in out of my classes. And so like accounting, business, all that kind of stuff, those would be my favorite subjects.
Mm. Now, what was your first job?
First one. So I worked for my grandfather, would probably be my first job, working like he was a construction worker or a carpenter.
Okay.
And so I would work on job sites with him. But my first official job where I got like paid by quote unquote the man or the woman was I worked at a restaurant in town, local restaurant, washing dishes in the kitchen. And which is kind of funny because I mentioned Poison earlier, and one of their first videos called Nothing But a Good Time, the singer and like the guy that was in the band was doing the washing dishes with the big, I forget what they call it, but it was like a big dishwasher, but it was like one that came down and you put all the stuff in and you pulled the lid down and then it steamed them clean. And then you pushed it back up and pulled them out. And he had the exact same dishwasher as I worked in whenever I started my first job. So, but yeah, it was washing dishes at a local restaurant.
All right, now let's move forward from the time you left school to now. Let's talk about your path. How would you describe your path? Would you say once you started getting into one lane, it was pretty much straightforward, smooth sailing, or was it like turns and twists and like a roller coaster?
Turns, twists, roller coaster, dead end, mountains, rivers. Like it was definitely wasn't a straight path. Yeah. It wasn't a straight path. Like it was like, even now, I mean, it's still not a straight path for me. Like, because I'm a multi-passionite.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I basically, I do exactly what they say you should never do, which is chasing multiple rabbits, knowing I can't catch one. You know, like they say, if you chase 2 rabbits, you can't catch one.
Yes.
Well, I chase about 8 rabbits.
Wow.
And luckily for me, I feel like I catch some of them. And even though they say that's not possible, that's what I feel I'm doing. And so because of that, it's never a straight path.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the easy answer.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure you heard the saying that says, change your story to change your life. And by story, I mean what we keep on telling ourselves on a daily basis. So when you, Corey, you had to change your story to either change your life or bring your life to where you wanted to be. How did you do it? Did you do it to the help of friends, family, mentors, books, videos? Tell us about the process that you used to change your story to change your life.
There's a few different times when that happened. One is whenever I got tricked into performing stand-up comedy, and that led into my speaking. And I didn't want to be on that stage performing stand-up comedy. And by doing that, that allowed me to change my story, because I thought the idea of being on a stand-up stage or any stage or speaking in public was death. I equated it to death. Wow. So once I survived and then wanted to go back the next week, that was an immediate rewrite of my story. And so that was one moment where I changed my story, I feel, which, you know, changed the trajectory of my life. Mm-hmm. And I feel another point was whenever I started my first business. I was only 18 years old and had no business being in business for myself and no knowledge of it. And I believe that was a moment, like one of those, Steve Jobs called it joining up your dots. You know, when you can go back and say, this is a moment where this was necessary for me to become who I am today. Mm-hmm. If I picked a third one, when I got my first corporate job working for Toshiba, you know, one of the largest companies in the world, they had no training program. Basically, I was given business cards and told to write my name on them, because they wouldn't even invest in business cards unless I survived longer than a certain amount of time. But they handed me a Zig Ziglar VHS, for those that know VHS is, training video. And I put it in the VCR in the boardroom. And that video, like Zig Ziglar and his teachings in that video, left a big imprint on my life. And so I feel like that's one of those other moments where I changed my story, because then I realized I wanted to help people so they wouldn't have a similar experience where they started with a job and didn't know what to do.
Awesome. Love that. Now, let's talk about your business, what you're doing. So you're a professional paid speaker. Tell us how you get into that, and tell us about your business that you're involved in right now.
The getting into the speaking side, I'd love to have an easy answer for that. But I thought it was going to be easier than it was. I thought it was going to be one of those, you build it and it will come. And it didn't happen at all. So I got into it and it was way harder than I thought. Honestly, like it took probably 5 years to get to where I thought I was going to be in the first month. Wow. Like it's a harder business than I realized. Mm-hmm. But I went full time fairly quickly and was able to support myself only speaking. So I did do it, but it didn't grow as quick as I thought it would. And so, but how do you get into it? How I got into it, one of the biggest things that helped me launch was that college I mentioned I got to teach at a college. Well, I had to sell them on letting me teach there. Once I did, it was a sales course, and I ended up teaching it for 5 years. Well, what would happen was people would approach them and say, hey, we'd love to send somebody to Corey's class, but we can't send all our staff. Is there any way we could hire him and bring him into our company? And the college said, we don't care. So they would bring me in, and then that turned into me speaking to their staff of 100 people or what have you.
Wow.
And so the college, in a lot of ways, didn't expect it, but it was a happy accident that actually brought me a lot of new clients. And so that's one of the things that I did, that I got lucky, where I decided to go to that college and teach that course, and then clients came to me that way. And then the flip side, I guess the other side to that is what it also involves is finding clients that hire speakers and letting them know you want to be hired as a speaker. That it's a lot harder than what I just said, but that's really what it amounts to. Figuring out who hires speakers, letting them know why they should hire you, and reaching out to them in the first place, and basically selling them on why you're the fit for their organization or their event. And so it's not an easy business. And that's really why I started a program, is to help people learn what it took me 15 years to learn that in weeks, because it is such a hard business. But that's where I started, was the speaking. And as you mentioned, that's been roughly 21 years. 8 years ago, I launched a speaking program to help other people do what I had been doing. 4 years ago, people started asking how I was landing branded talks, like a TedX talk type thing. So then I started teaching that. 2 years ago, I launched a thing called Blue Talks, which is kind of like a mix between Chicken Soup for the Soul and TEDx. And essentially, it's become a live speaking platform where we bring in speakers to speak live. It's become a book series, so like an anthology book series like Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's become a podcast, and it's become a virtual stage. And so Blue Talks officially launched about a year ago. We started the whole process 2 years ago. And now in the last 12 months, it's been going amazing. Like, I've been blown away by the results. But that's how I'm spending my time now, is helping other people get stages, get platforms, speak, write, get interviewed, interview other people, just really bring them the opportunities and the knowledge for how to become an influencer tomorrow.
So what is the structure of your programs? Are they like one-on-one, small classes, big classes, weekly calls? Tell us about the structure of your program, if someone is watching and listening to this and is interested in, so they can get to know more about your program.
So for me, I guess in terms of the structure, I did this intentionally. I wanted it to be a bit of a hybrid. So whenever I'd signed up for programs in the past, it would be one of two things. They would either be all live, and I wouldn't get there, and then either I had to watch the replay and I missed stuff, or I never caught up in the replays, because I find people are more apt to watch when they're there live than watching a replay later. So that was one thing. But then the other side is I went into programs where they weren't live, and I had no interaction with anybody. It was just like on your own, self-study. And I found with both of those things, I would sign up and not use them. So I tried to create a hybrid of both. So with our programs, it is a self-study thing where it's like, for example, our speaking program is a 12-week program. Every week we release a new video, new training. I try to make it high-level stuff, so it's always like 30 to 40 minutes. It's not like 4 hours watching a video, because I find nobody's wanting to do that anymore. So there's the self-study where you study on your own. But then on top of that, we have monthly live Q&A calls inside our private Facebook group. We have a private Facebook group that's like a community where people can connect with each other, learn from each other. We have guidance where they can send emails anytime they have questions. We also have opportunities beyond being in the program, like we share when other people are looking for speakers. We'll share leads like that, paid opportunities. We interview people as part of the deal. Like, we'll basically part of the bonuses is they can be on our top-rated show. And so it's a very hybrid, interactive type thing where you can be in the group and be a part of live calls and ask your questions live. You can do the self-study training. You can do it at your own pace. You can come along with us when we release it every week. So it's a real mixture is the best way I can explain it. But the idea is to give you all the knowledge you need to build a speaking business from scratch.
Now, what would you say is your ideal client?
What's that? Sorry, I missed that last part.
What would you say is your ideal client?
Ideal client. So I know who our typical client is, and I believe they're our ideal client as well. And it's a really it's unique. So it's not hard to explain, but it's unique. So it's the best way I can sum it up quickly is it's a healer, solopreneur, a lifestyle entrepreneur in the age range of about 30 to 55, and male or female, but about 75% plus of our clients are female. So again, that's not that I targeted it that way. It's just that's traditionally is what happened. And so that, I mean, it's like the healer part, I find I end up working with a lot of heart-based entrepreneurs, but almost everybody that comes into our program is self-employed. So they're solopreneurs, lifestylepreneurs, they're laptop lifestyle. Having said that, I'm starting to do a bit more targeting of like CEOs, sales managers, presidents of companies who want to transition into a full-time speaking career. They're already speaking probably anyway, but they're not getting paid to do it. They're working for somebody else that might want to, they might be either displaced soon or they might decide to move on or something like that.
Awesome.
So, but the solopreneurs, healers, lifestylepreneurs, and then again, that 30 to 55 range would be kind of the sweet spot.
Okay. Now, tell us about an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients. One of the most amazing success stories you've had so far.
Well, I had one recently that really touched me and stands out to me because of the nature of how it was shared. But it was a client of mine who we helped her land 2 TEDx talks.
Wow. And
we helped her get paid speaking engagements. She was already a full-time speaker, but she wanted to up level. And we were launching a member site that we have. And during the launch, I was interviewing her, or she was interviewing me rather, about the member site. And then she said, the reason I work with Corey is, and then she basically shared that we helped her for the first time in her life get to a 6-figure income. And that as a single mother, basically for the first year, she was able to buy any gift she wanted for her kids for Christmas. She actually broke down in tears sharing that story. Absolutely. And so that stands out to me because I didn't expect it, and it wasn't planned, it wasn't asked for. But yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, there's nothing that can compare to that.
Absolutely. Wow. Beautiful story. Now, one of the key fundamentals of business is having an irresistible offer. What would you say is your irresistible offer in your business?
It's again, because there's multiple. So I'm thinking for what is really what's really the one I'd want to hone in on. And I feel like the irresistible offer it's our Blue Talks brand for sure. And it's the offer that whenever you come on board with us, you're going to, within very short order, have extra credibility, like increased credibility, maybe even tenfold, because of the fact that we're giving you all the things that you'd normally have to get on your own, trial and error, and take maybe even years to accumulate. So what I mean by that is a polished video that demonstrates exactly who you are, where all you have to do is show up and speak. Podcast interview that you can share on your website. It will help you build an as seen on banner so that when people come to your website, they see as seen on and you have instant credibility versus somebody that doesn't have that. And so I think the irresistible offer is the fact that for a very minimal investment, you can take your entire career as an influencer or a future speaker or an author to the entirely next level in a very short amount of time.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. How are you getting your clients? Do you have a specific marketing game plan? Are you working with an agency, or you just use your testimonial and success stories and word of mouth to find your clients?
There's definitely a mixture, but for the sake of simplicity, I would say our biggest inflow of clients right now is word of mouth. And the word of mouth is not just general word of mouth. It's actually clients that are already a part of Blue Talks, for instance, will say, hey, I just ran into so-and-so, and she was telling me she wanted to take her speaking career to the next level. I told her about Blue Talks. Can I connect you to? Like, that's its own sort of funnel, which I didn't plan. It's just people really that have had the experience themselves, and we help them up level. And now they want somebody else to have the benefit of that. In fact, somebody connected me with another person, somebody that's in our ecosystem connected me with somebody about a week ago. And I messaged her today and said, great news, the person signed up. And so I'm going to send you a referral fee next week. And she said, oh, I didn't even know you had a referral fee program. Oh my God, that's amazing. Great day. What I'm saying is, like a scenario like that, she was willing to do that thinking that I wasn't going to reward her for that. So that kind of stuff is really probably where a large percentage of it's coming now. I mean, there's different funnels, but that's the biggest one. I also have a healthy size newsletter. So if I have something like, if we had, for example, if we're working on the next Blue Talks book, I mean, it's within my reach to press a button and say, hey, who wants to co-author a book with me in 2022? And so that, if every time I do that, that basically generates different people that express their interest as well.
Speaking of books, you mentioned that you've written quite a few books. Tell us about your books.
So again, there's quite a few. So I'll say the book that probably I'm most passionate about still, and I feel like it's always going to be that way, it just seems the book never seems to disappear, is a book called The Book of Why and How. Wow. And, between compilation books and that book, I think I'm at book number 16. That book is, for whatever reason, it was 20 years in the making, 2 years to write. That was 5 years ago. It did really well self-published. Then I brought it to a publisher. It's had a life with a publisher. Like, the book just won't go away. It's like the itch that won't go away no matter what I do. And it keeps like, just yesterday, I was being interviewed by somebody, and when she was doing the introduction, and I was trying to get on because she was on Facebook Live, and she couldn't see me to bring me on, but I could hear what she was saying. And she talked, and I didn't know this. And she talked about how the Book of Why helped her when she was at a low point in her life. And she went into detail on that. I didn't even know she read it. And so this book, because that stuff continues to happen, even though, like, the book sold thousands of copies, but even like that continues to happen, it keeps wanting me to get it in more hands. Even if it ends up being 10 years old, whenever I know that it'll get in somebody's hands 10 years later and have one person say, it renewed my faith in something, then I'm always going to want to put that book out to the world. For instance, I had somebody that reached out to me one day and said that they were debating leaving business altogether, and they're an influencer. Their influence level would be higher than mine. And they were saying, I was thinking of throwing in the towel. They had a couple of bad things happen business-wise, and they're like, I was thinking of throwing in the towel. And over the holidays, they read the book. Again, I sent it to them. I sent them the book. I didn't even think any more of it. And they sent me a voice message saying that they feel the book saved their business life.
Wow.
And they're going strong again now. And so that's the book I always go to when people ask me about my books.
Is your book available on Amazon?
It is, but I'll go one better. So it is available on Amazon. So if people are like me and they love reading print books, you can literally type in my name and look for Book of Why. You can type in the Book of Why and How and find it. Pretty much if you type in my name on Amazon, the books that I'm involved in are going to come up. It's going to stand out. But what I wanted to do, if it's cool, Lorenzo, is also give people a gift. And the gift relates to that book. It's the audiobook. So for those that like listen to audiobooks, I'd like to give your viewers and listeners a free copy. And it's pretty easy. You just go to the Book of Why Audio. So the Book of Why Audio.com. And within 2 minutes of you going there, pretty much you can be listening to the audiobook.
Beautiful. Thank you. Very kind of you and generous. I'll definitely put that in the show notes, both the audio and the link directly on Amazon to this book and any books you have. I'll put all of those links on the show notes. Absolutely. That's amazing. Wow. Now, let's move a little bit forward. Like, we can talk for hours. We've been talking for 2 hours now. So let's start to wrap things up. So, the theme of this podcast is building businesses with impact and with cause. What would you say is a cause that is dear to your heart, Corey?
There's multiple, but I feel like one of the biggest for me is probably local food banks, because for the most part, it feels like with local food banks, the actual, let's call it the charity, the gift, the donation seems to get to the people that need it. And so I really am passionate about those. But then, like local food banks, but then at the same time, I've had family members impacted by Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, and stroke, heart disease. And so I would say there's multiple that have sort of affected me. And I'm probably passionate about all of them, but the food banks are the ones, like I said, where you can literally bring the food in and know that in most cases it's going out to that person the next day.
Love that. Have you heard of B1G1?
I have not, no.
It's a buy one, give one. So it's one of the most beautiful organizations in the world. They started in 2007. Each time business is done, someone in need gets to benefit from it. And so far, they've helped 260 million people worldwide. I just had the honor of having two of the co-founders of my podcast. First, Mr. Paul Dunn at the end of September, and the second co-founder, his wife and co-founder as well, Masami Sato, just last night. Absolutely phenomenal. Highly recommend you give that a watch, and even just go on b1g1.com. The beautiful thing about them is that 100% of all contribution that we give goes directly towards the cause. And on top of that, causes can start with as little as 1 cent. So for example, each time they get on a Zoom call, someone gets access, a kid in a third world country, for example, gets access to education or books. So they have tremendous programs out there, and everything we give go directly towards the the cause. And that's something big, because a lot of people are kind of hesitant to donate to charities because of, a big portion goes towards admin fees, which is basically paying salaries for executives, and which honestly these people don't need it. But with this organization, everything goes directly to the cause. And they've built a massive organization around the world, and now their goal is to reach 1 billion people. So highly recommend for anyone watching to check them out. They're really one of the shining lights in the world.
Amazing.
So awesome. Now let me now ask you to finish off some rapid fire questions, and I want you to it's going to be some fun questions. Let's talk first about advices. What would you say has been so far the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Work smart, not hard, or work smart and hard. But
Love that.
Work smart is the big takeaway there.
Love that. And on the other side, what would you say has been so far the worst piece of advice you received?
I saw. It's funny. It was just the other day I saw this. I'm trying to remember the wording of it, but the gist was. What that? Sorry.
Get a job.
No. I mean that for me now that would probably be bad advice, but I'm trying to think of how he worded it. But basically, the gist of it was the person said to not focus on. Well, okay, I'll say it this way. I can actually give you a better example. It's when you get told, for example, in school, to work on the areas that you're weak at, and don't worry about the areas you're strong in. And yet 90% of the thought leaders I've interviewed focus on their strengths and hire for the weaknesses. Mm-hmm. But in school, we're taught to focus on our weaknesses and ignore our strengths. Exactly. So that to me is bad advice.
Absolutely. Now, imagine that you add a time machine. You can go back in time and sit face to face with an 18-year-old Corey. What would be the number one advice you would give to him, knowing everything that you know now?
This is interesting because I don't know if you know this, but I've asked this question thousands of times. So, sure. So I don't know if I've answered it twice. So it's neat to kind of be on the other shoe on the other foot. I feel like I'm kind of jaded. I'm kind of what would you call it, biased, because I've heard so many answers asking this question, and so I probably would give a different answer had I not heard all those answers, because now I'm kind of guided by those answers. So the most common theme I've heard as an answer is, don't worry about all the stuff you're worried about right now, because it won't matter in a year. Don't try to change how things are, because you need to go through this. You need to go through this to become who you are later. And so I think I would tell myself, probably, don't change a thing. Don't, like, a big part of it is that when I was younger, I was always worried that I talk too much, or I would, you do a talk and somebody 1 out of 100 would say you talk too fast. And then I would try to change that. So I think I would just tell myself, stop focusing on the 1 out of 100 and serve the 99 out of 100 that actually enjoy who you are.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Now, You're a prolific and very successful podcaster. Imagine that today you have the most special guest in the world, which is you're interviewing yourself. So, what would be the first question you will ask yourself? You want to ask yourself, don't think too much. What is the first question that comes to your mind?
So I want to make sure I understand that. The first question, if I was interviewing myself, the first question I would ask myself,
Yes,
is that
that you
the
want
question?
to ask yourself. Yes.
What is the one thing that you can share with me that you've never shared with anybody?
And what would that be?
I think one of the things I think I shared today, I was thinking about it after I told it to you. It sounds random because it's not that big of a deal, but about when I said about how when I started out, I shared a bit of my backstory. I've never shared that my first car that I had to get a co-signer for a $400 Chevette. And so I know it's random. It's not like this big sexy answer or moment, but I think even something like that, like the fact that I can't, it blows my mind. I've never shared that. Between me interviewing people and being interviewed thousands of times, I've never once shared that with anybody. So that's what popped into me today because I've never shared it before.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
So I think that's what I would share.
Now, one of my favorite questions to ask and is, what is the smallest thing you've done that has had the biggest impact on your life? For me, it's been starting this podcast. What would you say for you it's been, and by small, I don't mean something small. I mean just one thing you've done that has had the biggest positive impact so far in both your life and business.
So the honest, natural answer is start my podcast as well.
Mhm.
It's pretty much the same answer. But if I look at like a moment that changed everything, one of them, I shared a couple earlier when I said joining up my dots. Another one would be when I read my first book. I shared it in passing. I read How to Win Friends and Influence People. That started everything. Like it started me getting into personal development. It started me learning, feeding my mind, all that kind of stuff. So I would say that would be another one. Just so, because the podcast is the true answer, but I also want to give you one that's not the same as your answer. So I'll just say reading my first book is another big one.
And if anyone is watching now and is considering starting their podcast, they're thinking, hey, podcasting is saturated. What is your answer to them?
I would say it depends on what your goal is around podcasting. If your goal is to get 1 million listeners to your show, it's possible, but maybe it is oversaturated in trying to do that now. Like now to do that, you're competing with like NPR and a lot of big brands that are bringing out their own podcasts. So I'd say if that's your goal, then you can still do it. And far be it for me to tell you not to, but I would say maybe podcasting isn't for you because it's not a natural path to do that. If you're starting from scratch, it's going to be a big uphill battle and you may want to quit before it happens. But if your goal is to do what podcasting has done for us, build stronger relationships, build your credibility in the eyes of others, if it's to impact lives with the stories that you're sharing on your show or the messages you're sharing, if it's any of those things, I would say it doesn't matter how many podcasts are out there because yours is going to be yours. So the world still needs your voice. And if podcasting is the way you want to share it, I think it doesn't matter how many podcasts are out there. Podcasting will always hold those opportunities that you can leverage. Sadly, whether I'd like to admit it or not, even if you only have one listener an episode, I mean, you can still leverage the show for you to get other interviews on other people's shows. You can still leverage the show to get an audience with some of the greatest thought leaders that you would love to sit beside or talk to. I mean, so there's so many ways you can leverage a podcast beyond just getting 1 million listeners and finding sponsors to pay for you to be on a show. So I would say it's not oversaturated for people that have the right goals. Maybe it is oversaturated for somebody who wants to jump in and try to take over the podcasting world with no experience and no background.
Love that. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and the person was saying that every business should have a podcast because as long as you're dealing with people, with client, every story is worth sharing. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that every business can benefit from having a podcast, whether they're offline or online?
Yes. Short answer is yes. I think if you leverage it properly, a podcast can be beneficial to anyone and for any reason too. Like it could be just simply as whenever your clients are thinking about hiring you, you can actually send them the podcast. Could be like almost like an infomercial and teach them about the work that you do. Like there's so many ways you can use it that I think any business can find a way to use it. Could be one of the things I've often thought about is it could be just even things like the company's leaders basically doing an interview that now they can share with new hires within the company. So highlight the CEO, here's my vision, here's this, here's that, do like a 5-part interview series. And then you share that with the new hires and that becomes a training. And then once you're done with that one, then you can interview suppliers. So your staff knows why you work with these suppliers. So yeah, I think any company can use a podcast.
Love that. One question I want to ask you, final question for myself, for my benefit, and I want you to be very honest, give me tough love. How can I improve my podcast? Do you have any tips? I mean, my show and my podcast.
Well, I want to say, first of all, you have very rich questions and a very disarming way of asking them. So you're already further ahead than a lot of people. It feels very natural. And again, because it's not argumentative, it's not an approach where it's very aggressive, it feels comfortable sharing. So I would say don't change that, because most people struggle to get to that point. So I would say don't change that. You know what? I honestly can't think of anything. Like, I think it's a personal choice how long your show is. So for me, I like to keep them around 30 minutes because I find that the influencers that I serve are often telling me, oh, I had to pause it 3 times, even when it's only 30 minutes. So I try to be on that side, but I don't necessarily think that's necessary. Like Joe Rogan, he has shows that are 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that have 5-minute shows. And
Right.
so I don't think, so I would just say, make sure that whatever timeline you stick with is right for you.
Yes, that's one of my struggles and my challenges. I'm trying to keep it between 30 to 45 minutes because I'm a chatty person, and usually the people I talk to are also chatty. We keep on going and on. And anyways, I totally get that, and I'm working on that. Now, if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
So I mentioned the free book. So I'll remind people they can go get the Book of Why audio at thebookofwhyaudio.com. So that's one option. And then the other option is just to, if people want to reach out to me, just tell me they heard me on the show, introduce themselves, all that kind of good stuff. I'll give my email address. I don't usually do this, but I'll do that today. thatspeakerguy@gmail.com. Again, thatspeakerguy@gmail.com. So they can reach out to me there, or just find me on social media and add me or request to add me, and then reach out and say, hey, heard you on the show, want to chat more.
We'll definitely put that all in the show notes. Listen, Corey, absolute honor, pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your generosity of speaking with me for the past 2 hours, especially an hour, giving me incredible feedback, valuable bombs, golden nuggets on how to get going with the audio side of the podcasting, because I've been doing the video for the past year, as well as getting the big names. Absolutely love that. I'm so glad I recorded that. I wish I had recorded from the beginning, because the first few minutes also were absolutely gold. Thank you for that, brother. Stay safe, stay awesome. God bless you. And if there's any way, shape, or form that I can help you and serve you, and I mean that, this is not just for me trying to be, polite. I really mean it from the heart. If there's any ways I can serve and help you, I would be delighted to do so. You can count on me. I'm here for you. So stay safe, stay awesome. We'll definitely keep in touch. God bless, brother. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.